Lando Norris just set one of the best laps of his career, but within minutes, the FIA launched an urgent investigation into his McLaren. Telemetry from Q3 showed a suspicious energy spike right where no boost should have occurred, and Piastri's car didn't show anything close. Now, Norris faces the risk of losing his front row start, and McLaren could face technical sanctions just hours before the final race. Subscribe now, because if this probe confirms a breach, it could destroy McLaren's season and flip the championship upside down. It was meant to be a statement lap. Lando Norris crossed the line in Abu Dhabi with one of his most competitive qualifying performances of the season, locking in a front row start for Sunday's race. But even before the car returned to park firm, alarm bells were already ringing. The FIA's post-session telemetry sweep flagged a high-priority anomaly in Sector 2 of Norris's Q3 lap, prompting an immediate and urgent investigation into potential violations linked to energy deployment and power unit control. The issue arose from what appeared to be a sudden surge in ERS deployment, specifically, electrical energy output that exceeded what was previously declared in McLaren's hybrid system map. According to insiders close to the FIA operations team, Norris's telemetry showed a burst of acceleration coming out of Turn 9 that wasn't consistent with his prior laps or with Oscar Piastri's identical car. The spike was large enough to trigger the automated compliance alert built into the FIA's technical monitoring systems. Sector 2 has long been one of the most sensitive zones in terms of hybrid performance due to its sequence of slow exits followed by medium-speed acceleration points. Any uncharacteristic surge in torque from the ERS can offer a major time gain, but it can also signal a potential breach if the deployment exceeds pre-approved configurations. That's precisely what happened in Norris's case, where the data suggested a front-loaded burst that didn't align with McLaren's submitted engine mode files. Immediately following the session, the FIA requested a full power unit audit from McLaren. The request included complete ERS deployment profiles, torque request logs, and system map verifications to ensure compliance with Article 5 of the technical regulations. McLaren, caught off guard by the timing and speed of the investigation, began pulling internal logs while temporarily suspending media availability for Norris and Piastri. Team principal Andrea Stella was seen entering the FIA's technical office for an emergency review just minutes later. The pressure mounted rapidly. With less than 24 hours until the final Grand Prix of the season, McLaren's entire weekend strategy is now in limbo. FIA officials are treating the case as time-sensitive, meaning any penalties if found would need to be issued before the race begins. That gives McLaren limited time to defend the legality of their car. The stakes could not be higher: either Norris retains his P2 slot and a legitimate shot at victory, or he faces a grid drop or worse. This incident couldn't come at a worse moment for the team. After months of development, McLaren had finally closed the performance gap to Red Bull and Ferrari. Norris's Abu Dhabi pace confirmed their progress, but now it's clouded by a possible regulatory breach. Even if the deployment irregularity was accidental or driven by software behavior, the FIA's stance on energy compliance is strict. Intent doesn't matter when it comes to technical rules. Only full conformity will avoid sanction. Right now, everything hangs on what the FIA uncovers in the telemetry and ERS mapping data. If McLaren can prove that the system acted within declared boundaries, Norris keeps his front row start. But if the data proves otherwise, even by a few milliseconds of non-compliant energy release, the consequences could erase McLaren's best shot of the year. This is no longer just a technical audit. It's a race against time, with McLaren's credibility and Norris's momentum hanging by a thread. Lando Norris's Q3 lap was, by all visible standards, a masterpiece. His car looked stable, fast on turn-in, and sharp on exits, especially through the technical middle sector. He crossed the line in 1 minute, 23 seconds and 394 thousandths, earning P2 on the grid. But when analysts dug into the timing data, that time didn't just look quick, it looked suspicious. Norris gained over 3/10 in Sector 2 compared to his Q2 run, and over 2/10 faster than Piastri in the same segment. In Formula 1, that kind of sudden time gain isolated to one driver and one lap is rare and worth examining. The first data point that drew scrutiny was the throttle application trace. Norris exited Turn 9 and reached full throttle roughly 7 meters earlier than in previous laps, with no evidence of a traction correction or rear slip. In isolation, this might suggest cleaner driving. But when this earlier throttle application was paired with a spike in electrical deployment nearly 5% higher than expected, the FIA's automated telemetry monitoring system flagged the data for further review. This kind of deployment boost can offer a significant advantage in acceleration zones without the need for visible car setup changes. The comparison with Oscar Piastri's telemetry only raised more questions. Running just seconds behind Norris in the same track conditions, Piastri's ERS deployment was far more linear, matching the profile McLaren had used throughout Q1 and Q2. His torque delivery curve was smooth and consistent with the team's declared map. Norris's, however, showed an early and steep ramp-up in torque between turns 9 and 11. That deployment pattern can be legal if pre-approved, but only if both cars are using matching control parameters under park firm. Speed trap data at the exit of turn 10 showed Norris at 4 km/h faster than Piastri despite identical engine mode settings. That kind of discrepancy typically reflects either a car setup difference or a change in energy release timing. But with park firm in effect, the setup explanation was ruled out. The only remaining cause was ERS behavior. Engineers across the paddock began running simulations based on the public GPS overlays, and several concluded that Norris's lap exhibited what's called a front-loaded deployment spike, an energy push earlier in the lap that drops off later to meet total energy limits. Sector 3 analysis added another layer to the story. After the deployment-heavy zone in Sector 2, Norris's pace tapered slightly through turns 14 and 15. This is consistent with a car that has front-loaded its energy release, burning through available deployment earlier, then entering a partial harvesting or battery-saving phase toward the end of the lap. That's not inherently illegal. But it's unusual to see such a strategy executed without prior use in earlier qualifying runs. McLaren hadn't shown this pattern in any session before Q3, which is why the FIA demanded proof that this behavior was mapped legally from the start. Fuel correction factors and tire temperature data also aligned with the suspicion. Both Norris and Piastri were running identical loads, and Pirelli's internal sensors confirmed nearly equal surface temperatures across all 4 tires on both cars. So, the performance gap couldn't be explained by tire phase, grip level, or weight offset. That leaves only one viable factor: the way the power unit delivered its available energy. For a team like McLaren, usually meticulous in deployment strategy, it was either a bold shift in tactics or an unintended breach of the rules. The net result is that Norris's lap, while visually clean and fast, stands out for technical reasons, not just sporting ones. The deployment rate, throttle timing, and torque delivery metrics do not align with what McLaren has shown all weekend. And unless the team can prove that this exact behavior was pre-programmed, declared, and compliant with all FIA documentation, the risk of penalty remains real. The FIA does not take telemetry spikes lightly, especially when they occur at the front of the grid during qualifying for the final race of the season. At the center of this investigation is the Energy Recovery System, the ERS. This hybrid component is designed to recover energy during braking and redeploy it under acceleration, providing a temporary power boost of up to 120 kilowatts. While this system is legal and essential in modern Formula One, the FIA has placed strict controls on how and when this energy can be used. Teams must submit ERS deployment maps in advance, which define the exact moments of energy release during a lap. Once qualifying begins, those parameters cannot be altered without penalty. The reason for this control is simple: a well-timed energy burst can provide several tenths of a second per lap, often the difference between pole and the midfield. To ensure fairness, teams are not allowed to alter ERS behavior on the fly or activate conditional boosts that weren't pre-declared. Under Article 5.2 of the technical regulations, energy deployment must follow a linear, predictable pattern unless otherwise authorized. Any deviation, especially a sudden torque increase like the one seen in Norris's lap, raises red flags. What complicates matters is the software logic behind ERS deployment. In modern F1, energy release is governed by algorithms that adapt to throttle position, gear selection, car speed, and other real-time metrics. These control maps are highly advanced and can be legal so long as they are submitted and approved before park firm begins. In this case, the FIA is reviewing whether McLaren's control logic for Norris's car was materially different from what was submitted and if it gave him an illegal performance edge. One of the main technical questions is whether Norris's car activated a front-loaded deployment profile without the FIA's knowledge. A front-loaded map means more energy is released earlier in the lap, allowing for powerful exits out of low-speed corners. This strategy is legal only if it's declared and applied uniformly. But if a hidden subroutine triggered this change without FIA approval, it would constitute an unauthorized mode and therefore, a breach. This is exactly what happened in past controversies, such as Renault's brake bias mapping issue in 2019. Another angle the FIA is examining is whether Norris's car used a deployment curve that adjusted dynamically beyond what is considered legal variance. The rules allow some flexibility to react to driver inputs, such as minor throttle adjustments. However, the margin for variation is small. Norris's torque trace in Q3 showed a ramp rate significantly steeper than his earlier laps and that of Piastri's car. That rate of increase could only happen if the ERS system was either responding to a unique override or was behaving outside of its declared limits. To resolve this, the FIA has demanded McLaren provide not just telemetry, but the original mapping declarations, control software code, and a full log of mode selections used during qualifying. These must match down to the millisecond. If even a fraction of a second's worth of deployment occurred outside legal parameters, the car could be ruled non-compliant. The burden of proof is entirely on McLaren, and the FIA's history shows little leniency when it comes to technical breaches, especially those that influence grid positions. For McLaren, the challenge now is to demonstrate transparency and consistency. If they can show that Norris's deployment behavior was a result of legal programming and repeatable across both cars, they may avoid penalty. But if the FIA finds unexplained differences between Norris and Piastri or irregularities in Norris's lap that weren't declared, the team could face a grid penalty, disqualification from qualifying, or even further sanctions. This is not a routine inspection. It's a high-stakes forensic audit at the most critical point of the season.